What's the most important skill you need when you play your drums live on stage? Have a think about it, and I'll tell you in a second. What's up guys, Dominic here from Drums on Stage. Now, out of all the techniques, all the different styles, all the different skills, all the different things we can learn behind a drum kit, what do you think is the most important one? If one thing was to stand out, what do you think it would be in order to play your drums well live on stage? Now, it's a little bit of a trick question because it's not really a technique as in a double stroke roll or paradiddle or something like that. It's a concept. But I'll go ahead and I'll tell you right away. The most important skill you need as a live drummer is control. Now, we can break control down into different categories, but at the end of the day, what it really means is that you know exactly what you're doing all the time and you never do things by accident or unaware. So you're always in control of your playing, of the different categories like dynamics, tempo, etc. And you always know what's going off and you always decide what's happening instead of things happening by accident. Okay, so let's break it down into a few different categories. First one being technique. So we can break that down further into, for example, stick technique and feet. So control means that you actually have control of your sticks. So you're not just throwing them around and letting them bounce all over the place. You're actually deliberately controlling what happens to your sticks. Same thing goes with your feet. So the more control you have and the less you try stuff. For example, for so long, I used to find double bass drum, not two bass drums, but double kicks on one pedal. I used to find it really difficult. And I think it was a problem mainly with the way I was seated, the way my stool was positioned and the way my technique would reflect how I was seated. But at the end of the day, I used to constantly try and do double kicks. So whenever there was a song that required a double kick in the beat or in the fill, I would try it and I would kind of throw my foot down quite hard. Most of the time, the actual sound would come out all right, but I wasn't in control of what was happening. I was just kind of trying it and hoping for the best. And it didn't always work. Like many a time I try and throw in a double kick or even a triple and it just wouldn't come out. One beat would be missing or two, or it just sounds stupid or whatever. But the point is I wasn't in control of it. It wasn't until I actually rethought that technique and actually sat down and thought to myself, I need to actually do this like properly. I need to learn it on purpose. So I sat down, I readjusted my stall, I worked on my foot technique, and now I'm in complete control. When I want to do a double kick, I can do one, no problem. When I don't want to, I can also not do one, no problem. So that's an example of controlling your technique as opposed to hoping for a certain technique. I can't remember if it's ever happened to me with my sticks. Probably like in certain stroke rolls, I would probably hope to actually achieve it instead of just, doing it on purpose under control. So that's an example of controlling your technique. Next, let's move on to sound. So sound, we can break it down further into dynamics and tempo. Needless to say, you want to be in control of both of those. You want to be in control of your dynamics. You want to make sure you're hitting the drums as hard as you need to, but no harder. And at the same time, you want to make sure that you're hitting the drums as hard as you want to, not harder than you thought you were. You don't want to realize later on, after your gig, when your band members tell you that you were playing way too loud and you didn't even realize this was happening. That's not good. I mean, if you know it's happening, then fine, then you just need to play softer. But if you didn't even know that you were playing too hard, that's because you don't have control. Same thing goes for tempo. The last thing you want is to either listen to a recording of a gig or watch a video that somebody made of you, and you watch it and you see that it's way too fast. And then you say to yourself, oh my God, I had no idea I was playing way too fast. I thought I was playing, this tempo or that tempo, but it turns out I'm playing way faster than I should be. So this is another example of not controlling your tempo. It means that you are playing at a speed you don't even realize you're playing at because you're not in control. So you have to really think about, when you sit down behind your kit, think about these things. Think about controlling the dynamics, knowing where you are, knowing what tempo you're playing at and keeping control of it, not just playing at, what feels right at the time, but then realizing later that it was too fast, too slow, too loud, or whatever. Next, we can break it down to structure. So structure basically means being in control of where you are in the song, i.e. not getting lost. Like, not all of a sudden waking up from your autopilot and saying, oh, hang on a minute, how many verses have we done? Is it the third chorus or the second? Is it the end yet? Or is it the guitar solo? This has happened to me way too many times. I used to have this problem on a particular song, and I used to end the song too soon. I'm laughing because it's just quite funny. We used to get to the end of this particular song, I'd lose track of where I was, and I'd end the song too soon. The band would all turn to look at me like, why on earth have you ended so soon? Whoops, sorry. And it used to happen to me like very often on this one particular song. It's happened to me on other songs and random occasions, but on that particular song it used to happen all the time. And so literally I had to sit down and say, okay, I need to work out a way to make sure I don't lose control of this ending. And I worked out a system that when I get to the end, when I hear certain things and I do certain things, I know how many bars are left, because usually I'm not counting bars, I'm just, playing. So that was an example of keeping control of where you are in the song. Another good example is literally last night, on two occasions in the same gig, my guitarist turned round to me to ask me if it was time for his guitar solo. Now, usually guitarists don't need to be told when it's time for guitar solo, because usually for them it's, all the time. But in this case, our guitarist was distracted because somebody had lent him a new guitar amp and he'd plugged it in and it was sounding great and it was all distracted with this new sound. That we were doing these songs, and twice in two different songs he turned around to me, kind of looked at me like, is it guitar solo time? I'm like, yes, it's guitar solo time. That's an example of being in control of the structure of the song and knowing where you are. Thanks to me knowing where we were, I could tell him straight away, because it was literally like a bar and a half before the solo. I spotted him looking at me, so I said yes, I nodded at him, yes, and he went into the solo. If I hadn't have known that, he could have, assumed that it wasn't guitar solo time and missed it, which he wouldn't have liked at all, because guitarists don't like to miss their guitar solos, do they? So that's a really good example. And this has happened before. It's happened with me. It's happened with other guitarists I've worked with, that we get lost sometimes. And it's important to keep in control of that aspect of your music and always know where you are. Similarly, you want to stay in control of your beats and your fills. So you want to know where each beat goes and you want to know where each fill goes. You don't want to be swapping, for example, swapping between the ride and the hi-hat during the same verse, unless it's actually in the original song or the song that you've written. But if you're just playing the verse to the song and you establish a beat for that section, the verse, then you want to keep the beat the same. And then the next time you get back to the verse, you want to also repeat that beat so that the rest of the band kind of know where you are, and so do you. Instead of just flailing around and playing different things on every section, it's going to confuse everybody, and it's going to make it harder to know where you are in the song, i.e. you're not in control of the structure. And also, you want to stay in control of your overplaying. If you're playing too many fills, too many complicated beats, it's going to get in the way of the music. And again, it's not so much about deciding what is overplaying and what isn't. It's about staying in control of it. So again, you don't want to listen to a recording of your gig and say, wow, I had no idea I was doing all these beats and fills and overplaying way too much. You don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that you always know how much you're doing. Now, if you play too much or too little, then that's a different matter. But you want to always know and be in control of how much you're providing to the song. Another thing we need to stay in control of is our habits. I'll give you an example. Me, I have a pretty, I wouldn't say bad habit, but it's a pretty frequent habit of performing snare drum drags and ghost notes. I do ghost notes almost all the time, and I drag my snare drum before I hit the bass drum, in different occasions. And the point is, it's a habit that I don't always know I'm doing. When I listen to recordings, then I go, oh, yeah, I'm doing a lot of ghost notes in, XYZ songs, which I probably shouldn't be doing. I'm doing the snare drum drag a little bit too often. So the point is, you need to stay in control of these habits and say, okay, I've got the habit of doing this, the habit of doing that. I need to know what they are and keep control of them so I don't do them unknowingly. And lastly, but definitely not leastly, if that is even a word, leastly, is that a word? No, okay, it's not a word. Fine. Lastly, but definitely not least. Last but not least, there you go, that's what I was trying to say. Emotions. Right, it's easy to get excited. Excitement's going to lead to, most likely, speeding up. And it's going to lead to hitting hard, possibly getting lost, all the stuff that we don't want to happen. So you need to stay in control of that excitement. Nerves, same thing. You want to try and control your nerves so you don't get lost, so you don't hit too soft or too loud. And anger. Anger is another one. If you argue with any band member for any reason, which, if you work in a band for a long time, it's pretty much going to happen at some point. You don't want to lose control and start getting angry. That's going to affect your drumming. It's going to affect your music. And that's something you need to stay in control of. So all of these things I've mentioned, all these different categories are stuff that you need to think about and you need to be constantly aware of. You need to be conscious of what you're doing in order to keep control of every single one of these tiny little categories, which all put together make up your drumming abilities, let's say. Because you could be an amazing drummer and you could be really good at keeping a steady tempo, but if you don't stay in control of your tempo, it's going to run away from you and you're not even going to know about it. So that's it for today, guys. Stay in control of your drumming. Scroll down, leave me a comment. Let me know if you've ever lost control of any of these aspects, which we all do, but let me know which one and if it ever led to anything funny happening, like my ending songs too earlier, for example. And I'll see you next time. Keep it groovy, guys. This is Dominic. See you on stage.